The stuff of many Cold War movies, the high-level swap of prisoners, hostages, internees, whatever you call them. But the swap also comes with a price, and what does the current major swap of prisoners signify? Is there a catch, and what is the convention? Join me, Jan Darasz, for How We Got Here.
The biggest Russia-West prisoner swap since the Cold War, over 18 months in the making and involving 24 individuals, was completed in Ankara on Thursday. Among those returning to the US are US Marine veteran Paul Whelan, Russian-American journalist Alsu Kurmasheva, and Wall Street Journal correspondent Ivan Gershkovich. Historically, prisoner swaps between the Soviet Union, later the Russian Federation, and the US were not unheard of. The first major exchange took place in 1962 and involved Soviet spy Rudolf Abel and American pilot Francis Gary Powers, swapped on the Glienicke Bridge connecting West and East Germany, now known as the Bridge of Spies. Abel had spied for the KGB in New York and served 4 years of a 30-year sentence. Powers was piloting a U-2 spy plane when it was shot down over Russia. Another significant swap on the Glienicke Bridge happened in 1985 and involved Marian Zacharski, a Polish intelligence officer who was traded alongside 3 other Eastern Bloc agents for 23 Westerners jailed for espionage in the countries of the Warsaw Pact. This exchange, which happened after 3 years of negotiations, was the largest trade of government agents in history. The last mass exchange happened in 2010, when 10 Russian sleeper agents detained in the US were swapped for 4 prisoners held in Russia, including former Russian military intelligence officer Sergei Skripal, who later survived an assassination attempt in England. More recent prisoner swaps included the release of US Marine veteran Trevor Reed in April 2022 and basketball star Brittany Griner in December 2022, exchanged for Russian pilot Konstantin Yaroshenko and arms dealer Viktor But, respectively.
I'm delighted again to welcome our guest once more, Witold Rodkiewicz for the Centre for Eastern Studies. Welcome to the programme.
Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure.
It's a great pleasure to have you and to talk with you. We're going to do the spies, prisoner, internees, however you call them, the
hostages.
Swap. The hostages.
Hostages.
Yes. Can you sketch us in what the balance of this swap?
Well, there are 2 considerations here and 2 points of view and 2 different weights, as it were. One is humanitarian, and it's wonderful to have those people who are basically captured by either Russian or Belarusian authorities, basically to have hostages who are accused of things that were completely ridiculous, like Mr. Gershkovich, who was a journalist, was accused of spying. Plus, we also managed to get the release of a number of Russian opposition figures who were simply put to prison for their opposition to the regime, to the opposition to the war, some of them simply for expressing disapproval of the war, or even saying that the war is taking place, because even naming what the Russia does is a crime in Russia. You can get 10 years for that.
Operation, yes.
So it's great to have these people back, and it's on in a humanitarian ledger. This is a great plus. But unfortunately, we're in a state of hybrid war between Russia and West, and there is another ledger, which is strategic and political. And here, I think that Russians are in much better position to play this kind of game. One very unfortunate consequence of this is that this is a message to the Russian spooks and everyone who is willing to take tasks and get paid and so on, that basically no matter what they do and no matter what kind of sentence they get, they can get off free or relatively free. And this is great encouragement, and or at least this will make it easier for the Russian special services to recruit people in the West to carry out
Yes.
unsavory acts.
They know that the Russians will always endeavour
Yes.
to save them. Is that something that you mentioned the humanitarian aspect of the problem, but we get a few journalists back, we get a few opposition leaders back, they get their specialists back. Is that in the balance of things, is that a fair swap? Is that calculation made when negotiating this kind of swap?
I think the calculation is different because, maybe this is one of the advantages of the system from the point of view of an average citizen, that those who are organizing this on the Western side, that is the American administration, clearly had a political motive.
There's the timing of it.
This is a great thing for them. They get a boost in their electoral campaign. They can provide, they saved their citizens, and they can provide. But this is great. So I think the calculation was done in this way. There are figures that are more important and less important, but there are people who are simply captured, like this unfortunate German Mr. Krieger, who was clearly, we don't even know exactly how he got to, why he went to Belarus. He was provoked, basically. I think he was enticed to go to Belarus, and he was captured simply to have somebody to exchange for Mr. Krasikov, who was, who murdered somebody in it's an outrageous way in the middle of the day on the Berlin street. And he got a life sentence, and now he'll be happy he actually will get promoted, and he'll be, he'll have
get his medals.
Yes, and a career and cushy job in Russia. So I think in that term you cannot really, and I don't think it makes sense to use this kind of calculation. One has to reconcile oneself that one is, in the final analysis, this is not going to create such a great advantage at the Russian side. They are going to win this, and on our side, we are good guys. We do good things. We do things to our disadvantage, even if we have to pay for that. I think this should prove to anyone who has any doubts the superiority of our system from the point of view of average citizen, in spite of all the cynical motivation that goes on our side, which is clear and undeniable.
Is there an accepted convention for doing these sorts of negotiations? Who makes the first approach? No,
I don't think there is a convention. I think there are some precedents that go back, and some both secret services, because it's clear that those who are operational in charge of it were CIA on the Russian side. The CIA was on their partner on the American side, and the FSB, that is the internal security service, was on the Russian side. So they have institutional memory of how these things were done during the Cold War.
Yes.
But I think the situation in the Cold War was different in the sense that the Soviet regime, no matter how, especially in its late phase, it was a nasty regime, but it was not a criminal regime like the Putin regime is. I don't remember cases of the Soviet Union taking, arresting and capturing innocent people just to swap them for their operatives. This was done usually, we exchanged, you dealt in the same currency. In other words, you exchanged your spies who are caught for the spies that the other side caught. There were some cases that were not, there was a famous case, if you remember, in the 1970s, where the Chileans exchanged their political prisoner, Communist Party boss Mr. Korvalan, for Mr. Bukowski, who was a Soviet dissident who was jailed. So this was a famous. There was even small joke in Russian about this that I'm not going to quote because it's going, but I'll tell you afterwards. It was a kind of reaction of this common man in the Soviet Union, very cynical to this exchange.
Is this the tip of an iceberg generally, as far as you know? We've seen this high-profile swap of one group for another. Do these swaps carry on in the shadows all the time?
No,
or
no.
Is the value of them because they are media friendly?
No, I don't think. Every case like that is it's not the first swap that took place during this recent Ukrainian-Russian war. There were cases before, and in fact, much worse types and much higher, much more important had already been exchanged earlier. I'm talking about, for example, it was Mr. But and Mr. Yaroshenko, who were relatively high-level operatives who were jailed in the United States. So on the Russian side, this was, apart from Mr. Krasikov, these were not, I think, not such important people. But I think that doesn't really matter. It even reinforces the effect, because if the Russians go to such an extent, make such efforts to get even those relatively unimportant people, then that reinforces the effect about which I was talking at the beginning. But there's also, I think, another aspect of this, political diplomatic, namely, I think this is, because it doesn't make, if you think about when it's taking place, one can understand very easily the motivation of Biden administration. But I think on the Russian side, there's also an intention to kind of encourage the current administration to sort of clear the atmosphere, improve the atmosphere, and to encourage the Biden administration to offer some kind of talks to the Russians on the issue of both Ukraine and the larger West.
Is this a signal by the Russians?
Yes, this is a signal. If you want to engage, if you come with the right type of propositions, we are willing to deal. I think this is a signal, and it's interesting because the general view always was, or prevailing view was, that the Russians were so interested in getting Mr. Trump into the position of power in the White House that they would be trying to help him to win the campaign. Whereas this is clear something a move that is detrimental to Trump and is very helpful to the current administration, which is it's kind of makes one think that perhaps the Russian calculations about this changed for some reason. Maybe they think that this administration can be persuaded, can be to reach a deal even before the elections, because of course if they can reach some kind of settlement, end the war, that would be a great boost. This would completely nullify the argument, one of the main arguments of Trump's side, that this administration got U.S. into the war, and it's kind of the war that's never ends. So I think the Russians saw an opportunity there, and perhaps they are trying to, this is pure speculation, but I think the logic, because as I said, it's clear why the administration entered into this, but it's not clear why the Russians agreed exactly now. Yes. Because if they had wanted Trump so desperately to win, they could have waited with this. It doesn't matter from their point of view. The humanitarian considerations don't play a role. Why not wait, deny this advantage to the people, to the guys they want to lose the election, and then help this, engage with Trump about this.
So it's a flying their kite just to gauge the political temperature.
Right.
If that's a mixture of analogies. Is the idea that we have these great swaps in the 1970s of the Cold War, the the 1979 hostages, the Iranian hostages, for example. It's just they're just going to pick up another few innocent oppositionists, or
Yes.
yes, it's not going to.
Yeah, the list. I mean, they have other people already in jails. One of the unfortunate things that, again, this is perhaps a speculation, but it's just I wouldn't be above dismissing any such motivation to this regime, which is brutal and murderous. Namely, it might turn out that the Western side insisted on having Mr. Navalny included in this. And
yes.
If that had been the case, then this would have been a motivation to kill him.
Yes.
Because he was considered such a threat personally to Putin as an alternative leader that the Russians clearly wouldn't have agreed to have him in the exchange. They could politically, I mean, I think this is what their subjective assessment. They wouldn't have let him free, and to end the issue, they liquidated him.
So what you're saying is that the oppositionists that whom they've released are worthless because they're outside of the Soviet Union, Belarus.
I mean, worthless is perhaps too. They are brave and decent and people, and I wouldn't. But of course, their ability to do anything effective is very limited. Perhaps some of them are already very sick after a few years in prison in terrible conditions. So I think in their case, the calculation is very clear. It's better to have them outside Russia than have them inside Russia. Because if something happens, then they can perhaps become, the leaders, potential leaders, and be the kind of rallying point of opposition.
Well, they can always send agents to kill them, I suppose, like they've done already.
Well, it's much more. Well, it's definitely much more difficult. I hope. But yes, they in some way they can also be tainted with this as outsiders. This always plays very well in Russia. You can always accuse people of being detached from the Russian soil, and in fact, I mean, you lose. That's why Navalny wanted to go back to Russia and didn't want to stay abroad. He was playing a very high-stake games, very risky. Tragically it ended. But I think he was, as a political animal, he knew
where it was effective.
That for him, if he had ambitions to take over power in Russia, he had to be in Russia, not outside.
It's a brutal world. But Witold Rodkiewicz, thank you very much once more for coming onto the program. Great.
Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure.
So that's it. Join us next time for How We Got Here.